Okay, I'm live. At least I think I'm live. All right. Hold on. What the hell? Okay, I'm going to have to go live on. There we go. Flip the camera. Okay. Sorry for any technical delays. Give me just one moment. All right. So cool. I've got 3 people on YouTube. I've got 1 person on Twitter. So tonight is the live stream that I've been talking about doing. I'm really excited to do this. Give it a couple more minutes to make sure that people are coming online. I'm really looking forward to this. So yeah, I want to give a few announcements about what's going to be happening over the next few weeks. This Tuesday coming up, I have the Hanford Art Hop, which is going to, it's every month, the second Tuesday of every month. And so February 12th, I will be at the Hanford Children's Storybook Garden. I will be promoting the books. I'll have them for sale. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be in that location. I've been at DJ's Collectibles a few times and a couple of other stores in downtown Hanford. This is going to be a new one for me. The other thing I want to talk about is the next major event that I have coming up after this, as far as I'm aware, is the release of The Heirs of Menenias. That's book 1. And it will be released on audiobook at the end of March, beginning of April. I've heard a couple of chapters of it already. It's really good. The sound quality is amazing. And I really think that if you're a fan of audiobooks, if you're a fan of science fiction fantasy, you're really going to enjoy the audio version of the book. And it's especially good, even if you've got a copy of the paperback or the Kindle, it's good to have because then you can take it with you and travel and listen to it while you're doing whatever. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and it will be available on Audible and on iTunes. The other thing I was going to do tonight was I'm going to be doing a giveaway. So the giveaway is, I've already been going through it, and surprisingly, I didn't have as many people following the instructions on my their first day on Periscope. Hi Ruth, how you doing? Good to see you pop up on there. That's awesome. You guys can leave comments and everything. I will try to answer the comments as best as I possibly can. So I only had about 5 or 6 people like, share, and it was like, comment, and retweet the pinned tweet that I had, and for applying for the giveaway, I did a random number generator. It's kind of hard to really work with that, so I went with a digital or randomized dice throw, and I landed on number 5. Number 5 was Derpy Horse Productions. If I remember correctly, I think he's local to the Central Valley. Hey, Ren. Awesome. Good to see you on Twitter. So, that having been said, I will be DMing or direct messaging Derpy Horse as soon as I possibly can when I'm done with this to arrange getting him or her the book. I have no idea. All right, so I said this month I was going to be doing a reading of book 1. This is actually the old cover, the original cover. and the image has actually been edited a little bit better for this. And so I'm actually going to be reading last time I did a reading, I did a reading of the prologue. This month I'm going to pick up with chapter 1, which is entitled Gavin and Nex. And so I'm going to be reading through this, and when I'm done reading, I will be doing a Q&A session. Oh no, I've lost a couple people on Twitter. That's a bummer. But hopefully the stream will be available for anybody else who's streaming in. All right. So the chapter 1 is called Gavin and Nex. And a little bit about these characters. These are characters that I've been developing for the past 20 years. They started off as comic book characters. In fact, the first iteration of Gavin and his story that I created was back in high school. I was a freshman, and I ended up designing this character. He was meant to be kind of a vigilante character, and he didn't really work out as a real-world character because comic book characters, there's something very non-normal about them, and this was a better fit. So you guys are going to be introduced to Gavin and Nex for the very first time. By the way, the names I pick are very specific. I go through, I'm really big on etymology and understanding the meaning and the origin of names, and so I make a point of trying to pick names that work exclusively for the characters. Gavin's name is Celtic. The name of Nex is a dragon that he is partnered with, and Nex, his name, it's spelled N-E-X, it's Latin. All right, so here we go. Chapter 1, Gavin and Nex. A flash of lightning stole across the inky sky. Gavin Lake watched from his bedroom window, sitting idly on the floor in the tower room of the orphanage that the administrators kept him in, separating the boy from the rest of the children after the evening meal. The rain began in the late morning, and it continued to storm well into the middle of the night. Sunrise would no doubt be coming soon, given that the slatted eye of the autumn moon, deep burnt orange in hue, hung low near the horizon. He had never seen it rain until the sun dropped under the veil of night. The rainy season that fell annually upon Pasco Dal painted the landscape and the structures with many torrential downpours. But the storms usually passed quickly, leaving sticky humidity in their wake. Electric bolts crackled, sizzling the ground in the far distance. The rolling, animalistic growl of thunder followed immediately after, shaking the very bricks that made up the chamber imprisoning him. Gavin sat hunkered down under an old, ratty blanket in a corner near the door. The water-stained, dirt-smudged glass of the window had bars on the outside. Rainwater dripped through a hole in the roof's thatching, spattering on the floor, trickling towards the egress, and pooling into a chilled, stagnant puddle on the cobblestone floor. He shivered with cold, brushing shaggy, straw-colored hair away from his face, revealing dragon-green eyes. Aside from his tattered pants and ripped shirt, the blanket acted as his only covering. He had gotten sick in the tower before, contracting a fever from the cold, and a cough that sounded as wet, ragged, and slimy as the dripping breath of a troll. It took several weeks before he recuperated enough to actually be active with the other children. But the children wanted nothing to do with him, afraid to be anywhere near him. At first, he strived to be accepted by them, trying to join in on games they were playing or joining study groups when they were being taught their rudimentary education. Every time, Gavin tried to make himself just like one of them. He was one of them. He bore the same local epithet given to all bastards and orphans in Pasco Dal as their last name, Lake. His parents died when he had been an infant, never giving him the chance to know them. He had no idea if he had any family. If he did, were they still alive? Would they even know who he was? The only bit of information he received had been from the orphanage administrators. He had been in their care since the age of 1. Until recently, Gavin hoped every day that just one of the other children would be accepting of him. After all, he was an orphan just like them. At the age of 7, Gavin had stopped trying to associate with the others. He grew tired of their insensitivity and secluded himself whenever outside of the orphanage's main building. But Crick, one of the older and bigger boys, didn't avoid him. He hunted Gavin. Every day, he sought him out and bullied him. Gavin tried to hide, just wanting to be left alone, but Crick refused to leave him be. He'd find Gavin, pull him from his hiding place, and throw him around the yard. Crick especially loved the days it rained because he liked to bury Gavin's face in the mud. He punched and kicked Gavin, careful not to get any bones. He just wanted Gavin to feel enough pain. Crick always got into trouble for his actions, but he told the administrators that Gavin had instigated the fight by harassing him. One afternoon, Gavin received his daily beating from his adversary, and for the first time he wondered why. "Why do you do this every day?" he asked. Crick had been taken aback by the question, perplexed. Apparently, he assumed that Gavin knew why and kept hitting him. But Gavin had had enough. He hated the injustice, the unfairness of being attacked over and over again. He hated having his face pressed into the mud so hard that he breathed in the muck. He hated the bruises and cuts he received every day for the last year. He wanted it to stop, and he knew the only way it would stop would be if he made it so. As Crick loomed over him, straddling his ribcage and hitting him in the face, Gavin balled up his own fist and launched it into the bully's jaw. His knuckles throbbed from the impact, and he felt his thumb dislocate. The hit rocked Crick backwards. Gavin, being nimble, slid out from underneath the older boy and kicked him in the chest, pushing him back. He got to his feet, his left eye shiny and swollen from the contusion left by Crick's beating. Many of the other children had encircled them, interested to know if Gavin was indeed fighting back. They watched as Crick got up from the ground and threw another punch at Gavin. Gavin ducked under the boy's arm, instinctively ramming his fist into Crick's gut. He left himself open to attack as the bully put him into a headlock, getting himself thrown onto his side. Gavin rolled across the soft dirt, tumbling sideways into the feet of a group of girls. Gavin barely dodged out of the way as Crick slammed his foot down into the earth, accidentally stomping on the bare toes of one of the girls. Gavin got to his feet once more, charging into the bully, slamming with all his weight into the bigger boy. The pair collapsed to the ground, tumbling over each other, only to wind up on opposite sides of the circle. Gavin slowly got up, his body aching. So too did Crick. "I've never done anything to you," Gavin panted angrily. "I've never hit you. I've never bothered you. Why do you do this to me?" And before Crick could say or do anything else, a doorway opened between Gavin's mind and Crick's, like a massive flooding spillway pouring out torrents of water. Crick's focus on Gavin's questions stirred up thoughts, memories and emotions he had repressed before being brought to the orphanage. Gavin read that flood of information, instinctually understanding the older boy's reasons. Gavin lowered his fist and relaxed his stance. "Your father hit you," he muttered. "He pulled you from your hiding places every day and hit you just like you do to me." Enraged by Gavin's words, Crick swung his fist once more, stopping short of hitting Gavin in the face. The children watched as the bully stepped back, his eyes wide and focused on something in the distance. They didn't know what he stared at. Many looked in the same direction, seeing nothing and wondering what spooked him. "I don't know who you are," Crick muttered, fear in his voice. "I don't know what you are. Just keep that damn thing away from me." Crick walked off and never bothered Gavin again, with no reason and no explanation. Other bullies filled the void left by Crick, trying their best to beat Gavin to a pulp. But now the young boy had confidence. He had courage, and he was not going to let another person bully him anymore. Anytime another boy, and in one case a very big girl, tried to pick a fight with him, Gavin stood up to them, willing to throw the first punch to make them realize he wasn't going to be a victim anymore. After many fights in the orphanage yard, those in administration often locked him in the tower or in the lower room in the basement levels from when the renovated facility had been a military fortress during the time of Menenius. At first, giving him solitary confinement had been for his own protection. When he railed against the men called to pull him away from the fights, telling them that he didn't need protection, the men told him it wasn't for his protection, but for that of the other children. Eventually, Gavin consigned himself to the sanctity of isolation. He asked the administrators if he could make the tower chamber his personal quarters. Surprisingly, they agreed, feeling it best to be separated completely from other children during the night. The administrators felt that they were acting in the best interests of the children. Not counting Gavin's brawls, by the time the boy turned 8 years old, mysterious things had been happening within the walls of the orphanage. First, all of the mice and rats vanished from the part of the main building containing the entrance to the tower. Everybody thought it was the groundkeeper's pet cat until the small animal was found charred and partially eaten. Eventually, the carcass of a wild dog had been found inside of Gavin's quarters. The administrators demanded answers that he couldn't give them. He had no idea. The events always happened when he had been asleep. He thought maybe some of the other kids were playing some disgusting joke on him, that they were trying to get him removed from the orphanage. He especially began to believe his theory when he found items out of place in his room, one of which had been an ornate statue of a dragon hatchling his parents left with him when he had been taken to the orphanage. He always kept it on a table in the tower room, but it consistently got moved onto the floor or onto a windowsill. In order to discover the truth of the matter, the administrators asked their groundskeeper, Gortrab, to lock the children in their dormitories and the tower door to prevent any nocturnal misbehavior. For 2 weeks, the animal carcasses, the scorch marks on the walls, the bizarre claw marks in the dirt stopped. They marveled at how strange things had been. But after the second week, the administrators found that even with the doors to the dormitories and the tower locked at night, the previous events became more frequently. A retaliation. More carcasses were found, not just littered each night on the ground or near Gavin's door. A deer carcass had been found inside the girls' dormitory. The base of the door burned and splintered as if something had gotten in. A trail of blood had been found leading to the main door, which had a similar pattern of destruction. The doors and the passages leading to the tower, as well as the tower door, had also been damaged. The orphanage's headmaster personally inspected the dark room while Gavin was at lessons, his club-like walking stick in hand. Something nipped at him from a shadowy corner, but when the headmaster shone his lamp at the corner, he found nothing. Blaming Gavin for keeping a wild animal in the tower, the administrators had his door replaced with one of iron, transforming the bedchamber into a jail cell. They didn't want to take any chances if he was the one causing all the trouble. They didn't care if he still complained about his statue being moved. They assumed the boy had some form of madness ruining his mind. It certainly explained his more aggressive demeanor. With the new iron door bolted and locked in place every night, the destruction stopped. Another week passed, and the administrators began unlocking the dormitories, thinking their wards safe. Gavin remained in the tower, wishing he could understand the mysteries occurring around him. At the moment, Gavin refocused himself. He had been dwelling on events of the last year that he hadn't noticed the rain stopping. The sweltering humidity had yet to set in. Shaking his head, he looked at the dragon statue. As usual, he had it set as close to the stone as possible. He imagined that if it had been alive, it might appreciate the view in spite of the bars. Though the circular bedchamber had a windowsill, the effigy resided on the floor where Gavin could keep a better eye on it. With all the animals being found inside, he often wondered if the statue came to life and ran amok through the orphanage. A silly thought, but he still wondered. According to the stories the headmaster told him, it had been with him when he had been delivered to the orphanage. The statue had an ornate design. Its green body had black around the clawed limbs. The eyes were yellow stones as deep and golden as amber. The fins running down the ridge of its spine and the talons were gold, complementing the shiny, lacquered body. For some reason, Gavin swore he had never seen its colors dull or fade, nor did it seem to collect any dust. It appeared perpetually clean, posing with its hind legs tucked underneath its body and the left forelimb holding up the weight. The right forelimb performed a reaching, clawing action. The mouth opened in a tight, vicious snarl, while the wings tucked and folded against the sides of its body. The dragon, his only possession, had been the only thing that in the entire world that helped him remember anything about his parents. As if by way of some magic spell, the memories of his family came to him at night, filling his heart and mind with the constant reminder that Gavin had been loved and his family protected him with their death. Sometimes he thought he absorbed something else besides the memories when he held the statue. It felt like something watched him, observed him. It seemed to be as much a part of the stream of visions that he saw when he held on to the statue just as it was separate. He could never really make a true connection, though. Even now, as he stared deep into the golden facets of the statue's eyes, he felt that connection. It simultaneously made him curious and frightened. He remembered his history lessons about how dragons used to live in Grand, and every time he held or looked at the statue, he remembered how alien the description sounded when his teacher read about the ancient beasts. It made Gavin feel like dragons should be familiar to him. Gavin closed his eyes, trying to force himself to sleep. It wasn't working. Nothing worked. He attempted to think of the largest number he knew and count in reverse. By the time he reached 0, he remained just as awake and alert as when he started. This was his third night of sleeplessness. Still huddled under his tattered blanket, he shivered near the door, bathed in the vanishing glow of a pale moonlight. As his eyes moved behind closed lids, a stirring came from across the room. Gavin opened his eyes. When his vision finally adjusted to the darkness, he looked at the room around him. He noticed something different with it, something wrong. The next sound he heard entered his ears as a scrabbling of something sharp and grating moved across the floor, sliding and slithering across the cobblestones. Then he saw a pair of bright yellow lights coming from one of the shadowed areas. Gavin stood, instinctively pressing against the wall near the door, raising his balled fists in a defensive posture. He blinked, looking at where the lights had been. They were gone, replaced with a scratching at the strong iron door that stood as the barricade between the chamber and the flight of stairs that moved down towards the main building of the orphanage. Gavin began to walk away from the door, his movement slow at first, though he began to speed up. A covered oil lantern hung outside, just to the left of his window. It hung within his reach, and he knew that he could retrieve it and pull it inside. He could see whatever had climbed in through the window to join him. He didn't want to be yelled at for keeping wild animals again. As he got closer to the windowsill, letting moonlight shine down, it illuminated a small creature clawing at the base of the door. Mostly green and scaly, its clawed feet blended in with the darkness of the shadows. Its yellow eyes blinked, staring intently at the door, trying to free itself from the chamber. It took Gavin a moment to recognize what he was looking at. He opened his mouth, but stared speechless. The beast pawing at the door looked no bigger than a medium-sized cat. Its body, completely uncoiled, moved lithely as it scratched the door, paced briefly, and then resumed its clawing. It had 6 limbs, 3 on the ground, 1 pawing at the door, and 2 more cresting out majestically from its back. Gavin stared at the dragon statue. His dragon statue. He came within arm's reach of the minuscule animal. When it looked at him, its eyes were eerie and intelligent, as if speaking volumes about the wisdom and knowledge that it potentially possessed. The moment their eyes met, Gavin felt a strange emotion wash over him. The moment he had looked upon the living item he owned and recognized it for what it was, all of his fear left him, leaving him with curiosity beyond anything he had ever experienced. Earlier that day, he had asked his teacher about the dragons, about their history. He had always been amazed by the stories. His teacher, a boring old woman with clumpy gray hair, told him that dragons had gone extinct. But she was wrong. Very, very wrong. He took 2 steps back, scuffling his slippers on the dusty floor. The dragon turned the full of its body to face him completely, curling its fore and hind limbs under it. Sitting on its haunches like a cat, it even switched its spiny tail in an idle fashion. Gavin took another step back. The dragon took a few steps closer to the boy, its movements quick and graceful in a way humans weren't accustomed to. Gavin tripped, fell, and landed on his back, bumping his head in the process and closing his eyes to the pain. He opened them a moment later, only to stare up at the ceiling. A leak formed by the heavy rains dribbled onto his forehead. It was all a dream, he began to repeat over and over. It was all a dream. I've been dreaming this whole time. I was asleep. What were you dreaming about? The voice echoed in his head like a reverberating rasp of a snare drum. It sounded much like that of a child Gavin's age. Who? He began. Who's there? He flinched when the dragon's head came into view. I am here. What are you? I am a dragon. Do you have a name? Yes, I have a name. It is Nex. And please, do not assume that because of my voice, that I am an infant. I am over 3 centuries of age, far older than you, but in some ways of the same mindset. When he heard the word voice, Gavin realized he hadn't actually heard anything. I never heard a sound, the boy stammered. I speak with my thoughts, Gavin. It is a long story, and for now I have neither the time nor the energy to tell you. I must eat and return before the sun comes up. Why? What happens when the sun comes up? Gavin asked. And how do you know my name? All will be explained. With a sudden burst of agility, the dragon, next, sidled over to the door and began running towards the window. Without stopping, he leapt through the dirty glass and out into the night, flapping his wings as shards of tinged crystal plummeted to the ground below. A short while later, as Gavin lay on the floor, draped in his blanket, he saw the tiny beast clamber back in through the window, just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. Until tonight, the dragon said as he tucked his wings to his sides, raised his right forelimb, his talons opened, and became a solid, immobile statue once more. Gavin couldn't sit still. He could not stay focused on anything except for the little cat-sized dragon talking to him the night before. The morning and afternoon yawned ahead of him, taking too long for darkness to arrive. He ignored his teacher during lessons. On 3 separate occasions, she called on him to answer a question, and he failed to acknowledge her inquiry. During his history lessons, he bombarded the old woman with questions about dragons, wanting to know as much as she could teach him, regardless of whether he interrupted the current lesson or not. At first, she repeated what she had said before, that dragons had gone extinct. The more he pressed, the more irritated she became, scolding him and writing out demerits for his misbehavior. She refused to say anything more to him outside of dragons being a dead race. She was wrong. Just that morning, before daybreak, he had not only seen a real, live dragon, he had had a conversation with one. In fact, Gavin enjoyed the idea of having a pet dragon. He entertained thoughts of games he could play with it, or conversations they could have. After all, it wasn't every day that one came across a talking animal. Night finally fell, the daylight giving way to the ever-inconstant moon. The sun's one inequality, letting the darkness shroud the skies, the land, and everything else on the earth. Gavin just couldn't wait until he returned to the tower, locked away in his room. Normally, he hated the place for its dank, smelly interior. It wasn't even the least bit comfortable or warm. However, due to Nex's most recent prey, one of a dozen egg-bearing hens that were kept on the grounds to provide food for the orphanage, the coordinators agreed to lock Gavin in the room until he either confessed to the crimes for which he really had no part of, or until a more suitable punishment could be decided upon. Gavin was quite all right with being placed back in the tower where he could talk to Nex all night long when the dragon came out of his slumber. However, the first thing he needed to tell the dragon was to stop killing the animals around the orphanage. He didn't like being in trouble for something he didn't do. Gavin climbed the infernal spiral staircase to his bedroom. It had an incomprehensible amount of steps. He lost count after the first 50 or so. The groundskeeper, a middle-aged man with a bald pate and a very bristly brim of a mustache, walked a few paces behind, escorting him to the chamber at the top of the stairs. The man had a pot belly from drinking too much mead, and walked heavily on the stone of the casing. He carried a torch to light the way and a small, thin, narrow leather strip, just in case Gavin got out of line, although Gortrab hadn't ever used any disciplinary actions on him. In fact, he was one of the few people at the orphanage that actually treated Gavin like a person instead of a burden. "All right, boy," Gortrab said in a gruff, gravelly voice. "Here we are. Give me some space so as I can get this key in here, into the lock." "Yes, sir," Gavin said, nodding, sliding close to the wall in the narrow passage to let the portly man by. Gortrab unlocked the door and hustled the boy inside. "Here you go," he said, tossing Gavin a brand new blanket. "Don't tell anyone, but I was thinking that you was getting a bit cold up here in this place, so I got you a spare." "Thank you, sir," Gavin said, appreciating the gift. "I'll be back in the morning to let you out for the meal." "Yes, sir. Good night." Gortrab closed the door and locked it. Gavin waited until the man moved far enough down the stairs before he began searching for the little dragon. "Next?" No response. He searched everywhere in the room, doing his best to see in the dark corners, but he couldn't find anything. Not even a statue. "Come to the window." Smiling as the familiar childlike voice touched his mind, Gavin followed his instructions eagerly. He found the glass completely broken away from the frame of the aperture, and the bars jutted away from the outer wall, leaving space just big enough for someone of his size to slip through and get out onto the moss-covered roof. He almost lost his footing on the slimy overgrowth, but caught himself just in time on the top rung of the cage surrounding the window. He looked up at the peak of the roof, next perched on the spindly weather vane, spiking out of it. His entire body twisted around the thin metal spire as he looked out across the horizon. "Why have you been pretending to be a statue?" Gavin asked. "You are direct." "Yes, sir." "No, madam." "You have a very honest spirit, Gavin. That is probably one of the many qualities my people saw when they chose you. Dragons are just as direct." "What do you mean?" Gavin asked, crawling closer up the roof to his serpentine companion. "What did the dragons choose me for?" "Gavin, you were predestined centuries ago to be the champion for my kind. A mystic foretold of the rise of a great evil that threatens to destroy Sikran, and he saw your destiny weaving into a great prophecy that I cannot even begin to explain. What I can tell you is how I came to be by your side. I was presented in the form of a statue to be passed on as a family heirloom so that I would come to be with you." Though he still didn't fully understand, Gavin nodded. He couldn't explain why, but every time Nex spoke directly into his mind, he could literally feel the truth brewing in the dragon's words. "So you were placed under a spell that made you appear to be a statue. Is that why you can't talk with your mouth?" "Yes and no. In the human tongue, it is called the Galorian effect, or better put, the gargoyle effect. When you celebrated your 7th birthday, the effect began to partially wear off. By day I am a statue, and by night I may walk freely. I was placed under this spell shortly after I hatched from my egg. That is why I am not much bigger than other hatchlings. But you wouldn't know what one would look like if I had not told you. Also, because of having a shard of eggshell lodged in my throat when I was born, when the spell was cast, I was never given the opportunity to heal. I must use my mind to communicate with you instead of my actual voice. I am in some ways handicapped." "Why was I chosen next?" Gavin asked, staring out at the horizon. "What am I to become? Why am I so special?" "You and I are to be Brohimistas. The word means spirit brothers in the language of the elves. Those are questions for another night, Gavin. For now, you must sleep. Trust me, all will be explained in time. For now, you should get back inside where I can watch over you more closely." Gavin nodded and turned towards the lip of the roof before he climbed down. He addressed Nex once more. "On that day that I fought Crick, did you do something to him?" Gavin asked. "He should have hit me, and he stopped. I entered his mind and told him that if he ever hurt you again, I would eat him. And I made him see me perched on your shoulder." "I don't think you should have done that," Gavin said. "I also don't think it's good that you eat animals around the orphanage. I keep getting in trouble." Nex nodded in a manner reflective of his reptilian nature. "I will make a point of changing where I hunt. I apologize." So Gavin returned to his room, curled up on the floor, and huddled under his new blanket. Nex followed him inside, perching on the windowsill so that he could keep a watchful eye on Gavin, while simultaneously guarding the window and locked door. Gavin gave in to the exhaustion and fell asleep quickly, feeling Nex's comforting presence in his mind. Nex yawned, his toothy mouth gaping wide as his tongue curled into the back of his throat. The fork tip caught an opening in the back of his lower jaw that sparked a release of fluid into his saliva as he swallowed. As a result, the dragon coughed, belching out a small puff of smoke. Shaking his head and silently chiding himself for acting like an untrained hatchling, Nex took a guarded position and released a fresh burst of searing flame. Through the fire and melting, reforming iron of the bars outside the window, Nex saw serpentine silhouettes slither out of the water of the nearby Oridos Lake that lent its name to the town surrounding the orphanage. 3 beasts moved from their liquid hideaway, swiftly crossing over the uneven terrain toward the barricaded walls of the orphanage yard. He knew that, regardless of what they were there for, the outcome would not be pleasant. All right, so that's a few pages in. I thought about reading through the whole chapter. It's a bit long, but I'm willing to read. But I'd like to see comments from you guys. So what do you guys have to say about what you've heard so far in the video. I'm taking comments. They are open. They are available. I'd love to hear questions or comment about anything. I got 5 people on YouTube right now, and they are not, as far as I'm aware, they're not messaging. Oh, here we go. Oh, start getting messages in. Okay. All right. Okay, so Derpy Horse actually makes a really good comment. He likes the way that Gavin looks at the dragon as less of a power tool and more of a pet, as any kids would. And yeah, that's kind of the mentality that I'm going with here. Gavin's 8, and so I wanted to make sure that he looked at that he looks at this creature as something cool, something neat, something he doesn't necessarily have to be afraid of. It's something that he can interact with. It's a friend for him. Ruth says that Gavin and Nexus story roped her in, and I'm glad. In fact, a lot of people who have read through book 1 have actually commented about how Gavin and Nex, that their story is actually one of the stronger character relationships in that book, especially for book 1. They tend to be a fan favorite, which is really good because I enjoyed writing these characters. Nex is a very interesting character. He's kind of underestimated because of his size, because he looks young, and so it's really neat because they both get to grow up together. It's like having a twin. They get to spend a lot of time together. Dolphin Studio says, I liked the confrontation between Gavin and his teacher. It showed his morals and intentions after his encounter. Yeah, he's a pretty moral character. He really enjoys. One of the things I have for Gavin is he's definitely the kind of character who goes after justice. He seeks fairness, not at the expense of others, but or of his own life. I mean, he's willing to put his life on the line. And the fun thing about this character is he is really kind of an isolated character, whereas the other 2 heroes, Asher and Amara, are raised around other people. They interact with on a regular basis, consistent basis. They have other human relationships. Gavin really doesn't. So through the first half of chapter 2, which deals with him in his childhood and his first interactions with Nex, Gavin. That's really what the first half of chapter 2 is about, or chapter 1 is about. The second half deals with where he's at, the current part of the story. He's in his early to mid 20s, and he's been really isolated from other people. He will go into other towns to get supplies. He will help out if there's a need, like if he sees some kind of criminal activity going on, he will step in there. But he, for the most part, he's by himself. He lives in the woods. He camps. He lives off the land. Doesn't interact with other people. He is. There's kind of a. I don't know. I like that idea that he is by himself. He's very self-sufficient. Ruth says, I was going to say that. I noticed in reading the first half of the book, Gavin is the only one who seems to not have much interaction with others. Yeah, that was intentional. Gavin is used to operating on his own. And as the story of book 1 progresses, you see that. He does interact with Asher, but when he has an opportunity to go and travel and explore what his role is as the dragoness, as this chosen warrior for the dragons, he is immediately jumping on that and just going straight for it without even inviting anybody along for that journey. He doesn't even doesn't even think about bringing Asher along. Asher is completely unfamiliar with what he's capable of doing, and he doesn't even think about trying to help his friend. So that's one of the things that I did intentionally. And even though Amara and Asher have both had experiences interacting with other people of their race or their culture, it's different. Amara, she's the youngest of the three main protagonists, and she was raised to be a princess. She's a learned individual. She knows magic. She knows how to defend herself. She's pretty badass. I'd like to think. And Asher, while he was raised with monks, very homogenic environment. You can see how that affects his character development. He goes from being this really kind of repressed individual, and by the time you see him being the primary protagonist of book 3, he is a much more refined and much more matured character. So any other questions that you guys would like to throw my way, I would love to answer them for you. Come on. Got one person on Twitter. Got 5 people on YouTube. Come on. Throw something at me. Come on. Hit me. Nothing? Come on. I'd hate to end this thing early. Okay, let's put it to a vote. How many people think I should continue reading some more? Okay, Dolphin Studios is asking, is Derpy Horse the only winner? Yes. I only have one book to give away, but I will be doing another giveaway once I hit a certain point. I have a really fun idea. It's going to be a local giveaway too. Okay, Derpy Horse asks a good question. Will there be a time jump for Gavin, or will he be A for the whole time? So, in chapter 1, the first half of the chapter follows Gavin as he's 8, as he's in the process of leaving the orphanage for good. And then the rest of the chapter and the rest of the book progress where he is in his early to mid 20s. So that's a great question. So yeah. Got no questions popping up on Twitter. That's fine. Yeah. So, what's another question about the book of the series? What powers will he possess? Okay, so the journey that Gavin is going to go on, he's going to learn how to bond with Nex. And I don't want to give away all the details, but he will be able to bond on a really, really powerful level with this dragon. They will be literally sharing physical space as one entity at some point in the book. With that comes all of the physical abilities that Nex has as a dragon, so wings, flight, immunity to fire, stuff like that. But the journey that he goes on, or that he's supposed to go on in the book, about halfway through, is to go and find all the other the dragon elders, and each of those elders is very learned in a particular elemental power or elemental magic, and so he's going to be learning how to manipulate all of the elements, and each element is associated with a particular moral. So like things, but I'm also currently working on a screenplay with a production studio up in Modesto, California. It's a science fiction story. Can't give a lot of details on that right now, but we've got about 30 or so, 30 to 40 pages done on the treatment right now, and we're aiming for about maybe 200 pages. So, yeah. From Menonias Prophecy, what can you tell us about the interaction between the descendants? Okay, so the title of the book is called The Heirs of Menonias. Menonias is the big bad guy from the prologue that I read back in December. And his prophecy was that his heirs were going to take over and finish what he started. So their interactions that each of them possess, in some capacity, the traits that he was known for, being a great leader. Well, not great in the sense that he was a good leader, but great in that he was effective as a leader. So one's going to be a great speaker, really good at scheming and plotting and planning. Another one is going to be a tremendous warrior. The other one is going to be really awesome when it comes to the use of magic. So these are the three traits, and each one of them have received these traits, but the way that they interact with one another and with the other characters is going to be wholly unique. You've got these three siblings who they enjoy. There's gonna be some infighting. There's gonna be some sibling rivalry because they've been, despite the fact that they have kept in contact with one another, they have been separated, and there's a reason for that. And you'll see that as the characters develop, they're just terrible to one another. Think of, and the only thing I can think of in regards to this is like, just think of the worst family dynamic you could possibly think of, and that's what these three individuals are like. Okay, someone says if they have a blank screen on their end. Yes, I'm still here. I would say renew your link. Do what you need to do. How's YouTube crash? It's still going. I'm getting a count here. I'm still getting your guys' feedback. If you're on Twitter, pull me up on Twitter. In fact, I'm going to type that right now. Hey, Ren's back. Or Ruth is back. She's on Twitter. Awesome, cool. Yeah, it may have been during the screen blank. And I'm going to. You will be able to go back and rewatch this on YouTube because this is being recorded live. So once it's all done, it will post and load up, and all you have to do is go back and rewatch that scene. It's probably about the timestamp right now is 49 minutes 52 seconds. I would say go back about 5 minutes from that, and you should be able to get my answer. But yes, I do collaborate. Any other questions? Come on. I think the next time I'm going to do a live stream, I'm going to just do a Q&A session where people just have their questions loaded. They send me a list of questions, they email them to me, and then I just answer them. What do I use to record? When I'm recording, like, Derpy, are you talking about like when I'm recording live stream or when I'm using, or when I'm doing my vlogs? Okay, so okay, he answered before I could send him the message. All right, so when I'm recording, everything for my vlogs. I record everything on my phone. iMovie is amazing. And I love it. When I'm recording stuff to YouTube Live, I'm actually using my computer. I have a Windows Surface Pro 3, and it's been great. Love it. Is your screenplay going to be about this series or something else? So the screenplay I'm working on is science fiction, normal. It's going to be like 500 years into the future from now. Has nothing to do with my book series at all. Completely unique, completely different from anything that I'm currently working on. However, that being said, I am in the middle of writing my current work in progress from my stuff that isn't for anybody else is book 5. Back in December, I thought I was going to be able to just kick back and kind of have a palate cleanser, maybe work on something else other than the screenplay. And then this obsessive little voice in my head said, no, let's work on book 5. You've already got it planned out. You got the map set. Let's go with it. And so that's what I've done. Since mid-December, I've been working on nothing but book 5. Last night, I was up until about 1 o'clock in the morning finishing the draft of chapter 7. And I started typing up the second draft of that. So I handwrite my first draft. The second draft is typed up. And so that draft, so I'm working on typing that up now. The funny thing is, as of January 29th, which was the last time I entered a new chapter into the full manuscript, I hit 85 pages of text. I'm currently at about 90 pages of text now with what I put into the computer. Okay. If the whole existence of dragons is revealed to the public, are there ever going to be any movements against them or potentially advocating for their rights, such as paired with household animals? Oh, that's a really good question. You know, to be honest, this is something I hadn't really considered. So, Dolphin Series asks a really great question about the existence of dragons. I'm assuming you're meaning for my series. The idea that they're still in existence is more of a secret to protect them from anyone who do them harm. See, the reason why they're extinct or at least endangered in the first place is because of Menenius. Menenius, he was so angry with the elves and dragons that especially dragons, he tried to eradicate them from existence. He actually found out where their nests were on the other side of the world and sent his lieutenant and all of his best warriors to go and kill all the dragon hatchlings, everything. And this actually plays into some elements that are crucial to the storyline in book 3. I'm not going to give anything away because everything kind of segues into the next book. It's always about the next book and trying to make sure that the story is continued. So I'll leave little traces, little dots, little breadcrumbs, little threads that they get picked up either by the end of the first book or they are continued on in the additional volumes. Unfounded Light. Well, not all of the dragons. There are still several dragons that he wasn't able to get a hold of. So Menenius wasn't able to get a hold of the 5 dragon elders. There's 5 of them spread throughout the 5 kingdoms. And I'm not going to say where because those locations are actually discovered in book 2. I want you guys to read them. And then, let's see, there's the Council of Dragons, which, and the King of the Dragons. Those characters are still very much alive in book 1. And then, let's see, there are still some other dragons that are in existence, as well as some dragons that Menenius mutated using dark magic. Unfounded Light, yes, you may. See if I have any questions over here on Twitter. Nope, no questions on Twitter. Okay, I'm not going to say anything about what happened at Corcoran High School. This has nothing to do with that. So if you are connected with who I think you are unfounded, then we're going to be having some issues. First, last, final warning. That's great that you like the book. Any other questions about the series or about what I read in the chapter? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, is magic limited to people born with the gift, or is it universal? Well, I haven't really planned that out. Magic exists; people are able to tap into it. You could have a character who's had no magical ability or skill, and then they kind of stumble upon it. It's about using the right words and being able to cast the right energy. Some characters have a stronger, more preternatural connection to magic. Um, Others not so much. And for the most part, most people don't use magic, especially after what happened with Menenias. They didn't, like, for example, there's one kingdom called Chisen. It's one gigantic, massive mega city that encompasses the middle of the Five Kingdoms. And they are very hesitant about using magic in any capacity, um, simply for the sheer fact that Menenias rose power through the use and the misuse of magic. Um, so there's I mean, magic exists, people know that, but they don't, like, there's certain cultures have a different level of appreciation for it. There is one particular group of magic users. They're called seers. For, basically, they are able to prophesy or have visions of the future, or something that can be either foretelling or forthtelling, depending on what is necessary for the story. And those are kind of a generational thing. It may be a character that you don't expect to have those abilities, and they show up, or it could be someone that is like, for example, there's a character that shows up in book 2, who's a seer. She's discovered, and she becomes crucial to laying out certain plot points through the rest of the series. Without going into too much detail, are all the characters you kill off ever make a return? Yes, Ruth. That is a very good question. And the answer to that is yes. Characters that I do kill off in some capacity will return. However, I am with a few exceptions. If I have a character die, they stay dead. However, I really don't want to say anything that would give anything away, because that would be, I'm selfish on that. Yeah, no spoilers. Thanks. So yeah, I will say this. If the character is likely to come back in another book, either they will be hurt or maimed, or if they do die, they are brought back specifically because they are still serving purpose to the story. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Is there a modern edge, or is it completely fantasy medieval? It's completely fantasy medieval. However, one of the things I like to do when it comes to the writing is I don't read a lot of fantasy when I am in the writing process, partially because I don't want to steal from other people or other writers. So what I will do is I will watch a lot of science fiction, or I will read through graphic novels or comic books, and those will influence certain choices. So, like, for example, I keep everything very old-fashioned, very medieval, very, very low-tech. However, magic is an ex machina. So, for example, there's one location in that central city kingdom. It's called the Citadel of Balerin. and it's a garden. And the moment you step onto the central floor, it's like this huge dais that covers the floor, and it rises up through the middle of the tower. It's like an elevator, but it's all done through magic. So I look for ways to explain how something is done, something that would function in the real world or modern day, powered by magic. YouTube went black again. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. YouTube can be a bit weird sometimes. Any other questions? When you do the time jumps you've discussed in the past, will there be an evolution in the technology? Not really. In book 2, I explore. I have some characters that are sailors. They have ships, and they're kind of based on pirates from the 16th and 17th century. So they do use cannons that fire cannonballs. They use some form of gunpowder. That's about as much advancement as they're going to get with the technology. And the reason for that is because there's really no need for the advancement of technology because of magic. When you have magic as that ex machina, it kind of really blows things out of proportion. And provided that you don't have, dragons going helter skelter on everybody or being used as weapons, I mean, if that were the case, I mean, everybody would be obliterated. I look to, for example, I look towards the movie Reign of Fire with Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey. Great post-apocalyptic story of what would happen if dragons really existed. And the dragons in that film, they're a scourge on the world. They kill everything. They burn everything. And so by the time the majority of that film takes place, it's, they're barely running on electricity. They can barely grow farms. Stuff like that. So my thought is, if you've got these gigantic winged beasts that can breathe fire, and you've got individuals who are able to use magic, technology doesn't really need to advance a whole lot. And it's kind of the reason why stories like Game of Thrones, stay in that time frame, because there's no need for technology to really advance. It's not going to advance because they've got access to magic, because they've got access to dragons and other types of creatures. So yeah, I thought about there was a version of the story where I thought about this was all happening inside their minds, and then they or at one point the variation was that the characters were going to jump into the future, but then it felt very unreal. It felt very unnatural, and the progression just didn't work for the characters, and so I kept everything where it is now. So yeah. Any more questions? I'll take one more, and then we're going to wrap it up. Hello. All right, I'm going to set. Oh, we got one. Okay, post time jump. Will there be any love interest for the characters? Yes. Yeah, there are some love interests. For example, one of the things I try to do is I try to make the relationships with the characters as real as possible. So there's actually a relationship that brews between Gavin and Amara. So just so you are aware, Amara is this character right here. That's Gavin with the sword. That's Amara. Go off the Twitter. Gavin, Amara, Gavin, Amara. And they actually develop they start to fall in love with one another. It's a very, very short romance. Um, um, Asher has a romance in book one that it's a pretty powerful relationship. In fact, it's been going on for 2 years by the time you're introduced to him as a character. I'm not going to give too much on that storyline because, again, spoiler alert. And then eventually, the relationship does not last for a few reasons. But through the progression of the series, by the time book 3 rolls around, Asher's moved on. He has found a new love interest. And yes, so love interests do exist. I try to really avoid love triangles. Those are so Twilight. So actually, it's kind of like the staple for most YA stories these days. Twilight, Hunger Games, Divergent. It's a trope that's been done to death, and it's the only time it really worked best was in X-Men with Jean Grey, Wolverine, and Cyclops. I'll just leave it at that. Ruth, you had a favorite relationship, but yeah, I agree. They are pretty annoying. All right, so a couple more minutes. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap it up here in just about a minute and a half. So here's the deal. My next event is going to be the Children's Storybook Garden. I will be down there on Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the Hanford Art Hop. If you are local, please, by all means, come and check it out. I'll be down there. It'll be an awesome time. There's 10 different locations, and they're great music, great artists, and I get to just be a small part of that. My next big event is the release of The Heirs of Menenias on audiobook coming this spring. It should be out by either the end of March or beginning of April. More details on that as we get closer. All right. So that being said, there will be a new vlog next Saturday morning. If I lived there, I'd totally support you. I believe you, Ruth. I believe you would. Ruth is chiming in from New Mexico, the Walter White state, where they have the blue meth. That's all I know about New Mexico. The only time I've ever been there was passing through it on the train. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. It was a great time. Yes, even you, Unfounded Light, even though you asked a very inappropriate question. All right. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, please do. Oh, by the way, that reminds me. The reason why I even did a giveaway in the first place is because I challenged everybody on Twitter to get me up to 300 followers. That happened really quickly. And as of tonight, last I checked, I'm at like 460 or something like that. Yeah, I'm up there now, and I'm really excited to build that. So my plan is to do another giveaway when I hit 1,000 followers on Twitter. So if you don't have Twitter, get it and find me. It is at GKJ_publishing. All right, and if you do follow me on Twitter, retweet my stuff. It's awesome. All right, love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.